President Trump over the last few weeks as President Trump tried to reach out to Prime Minister Modi and speak to him to come to agreement on certain tariff outstanding issues with the hope of reaching some sort of an interim agreement. But the Prime Minister resisted those efforts, did not take those calls. Remember, viewers, last week a report had appeared in a German newspaper, in fact quite a well-known German newspaper, that first broke this story, that the Prime Minister refused to speak to President Trump despite President Trump making 4 different attempts to contact him on the telephone. That, of course, led to a huge amount of speculation as to the nature of the relationship at this moment between India and the United States. Many people saying that that was suggestive of the deep, at some level, frustration that New Delhi has experienced on the back of Trump's continuous onslaught, specifically insinuating that he was the individual that led to the hostilities between India and Pakistan ending because he brokered a truce. As you know, viewers, that statement runs riot against Indian sensitivities. India has never accepted, especially after the Shimla Agreement, any role of a third-party mediator in trying to, of course, bring about rapprochement between India and Pakistan. That was seen as an undermining of India's sovereignty and its own articulation of its own attempts at diplomacy. So fundamentally that created the bad blood. The Prime Minister subsequently refused to take, according to all these reports that are coming in thick and fast, any calls from President Trump aimed at trying to assuage either India's disconnect over tariffs or even, of course, India's own frustrations with President Trump. Now let's go straight across to Siddhant Mishra. Siddhant, give us a quick overview of this article that has been put out by the NYT, confirming what we already knew to some extent.
Well, that's right, Rahul, as you rightly said, that for the first time, this piece of information came to us via a very credible German newspaper. In fact, they for the first time published that President Trump wanted to speak to Prime Minister Modi, but Prime Minister Modi did not agree for it. Now, this is for the second time. In fact, this piece has been published by New York Times, and this is about the Nobel Prize and testy phone call, how the Trump-Modi relationship unraveled. So it's a long piece that has been published in New York Times. Now, it says 2 things. One, that there were talks of trying to set another call after June 17th telephonic conversation between the two leaders to finalize a partial trade deal. But Indian side, Indian officials were nervous that Mr. Trump would post whatever he wanted on Truth Social, regardless of what agreements were made on the call. This is what a senior official has told New York Times. Now, in the next paragraph, the New York Times writes that frustrated by the tariff negotiations, reached out to PM Mr. Modi several times, according to 2 people. So it also says that Mr. Trump reached out to Prime Minister Modi several times, according to 2 people, briefed on the discussion. So after German newspaper, now New York Times has come up with a similar story. As far as sources in Indian government, Rahul, then some of them have denied this to me. They have called the report not true. I'm not talking about the New York Times report, but when the German newspaper came up with that piece, at that point in time, some of them told me it's not correct. But then, the others are still silent. They are neither confirming nor denying. So this is for the second time that a reputed international group, international publication, has come up with a similar story that Trump wants to speak to Prime Minister Modi. And in fact, New York Times writes that Mr. Trump, frustrated by the tariff negotiations, reached out to Mr. Modi several times.
Well, of course, it shows that the Prime Minister has decided in principle not to accede to what many people say are unfair and unreasonable demands by President Trump, specifically the application of sanctions on India. So would you say, Siddhant, that there is a feeling in New Delhi that relations between India and DC are at their lowest ebb in a long time, and number two, that there is a widening trust deficit that needs to be very quickly cauterized before it becomes a problem.
That's right, Rahul. To an extent, what you said is absolutely right. But Rahul, we always say this, that India-US relationship is beyond personalities. Now, if we exclude President Trump for a moment, and then just think about the cooperation between the two countries. In fact, last week only, India and United States had 2+2 official level dialogue, and in which both sides discussed nuclear cooperation, semiconductor, critical minerals, etc., etc. So, as far as official level dialogue is concerned, definitely there is talks still going on. In fact, top sources in government have also told us the other day that trade talks are still not off the table. Both sides are in touch. So, as far as the officials are concerned on both sides, they are in touch. No trade talks have gone off the tables. As far as 2+2 official level dialogue is concerned, it happened. And perhaps there's also going to be a joint exercise in Alaska between United States and India. But as this article also says, that the problem has been created by President Trump and his administration. So perhaps they need to be blamed for this status of India-US relationship, where the two leaders are not talking to each other. Leader of America wants to speak to leader of India, but then Indian officials are wary of the fact that the president of the United States posts his message real time, without even considering the sensitivities, without even considering the foreign policy diplomatic nuances. He frames his message and puts out those messages. So that is something which definitely Indian side has not been liking. In fact, in many of the off-camera, conversations that I have managed to had in last couple of months, perhaps it is definitely a concern for the Indian side that President Trump does real-time tweeting. He posts messages real-time and without even considering or giving a thought about the sensitivity of the other nation. And in fact, the question also arises for his advisors that they need to brief President Trump about the sensitivities and they need to inform him about the foreign policy nuances, etc. Right. But that is also not being done, or whether it's being done, but it is not getting reflected in what President Trump is saying or writing on Truth Social. So definitely, I can also confirm what New York Times has written, Rahul, as far as Indian officials concerned, that President Trump, regardless of what agreements were made on the call, but he puts out what he wants to put out, what he wants to convey. So that has always been his messaging.
That's right. Without taking into the sensitivities of the Indian position or positions of any other interlocutor that might have actually tried to facilitate any sort of a conversation. That's a very, very important point, Siddhant, you make. Yes, there are many points of convergence between India and America. And if one person is trying to sort of dictate the flow of that relationship, that is not something that will lead to a larger fracturing of the equation between India and the United States, just creating an awkwardness which could perhaps temporarily set back an association that has been cherished and valued. And of course, America gains so much, Siddhant, from this particular association simply because India is seen as a leverage against China in its own pivot to the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much, Siddhant, for that nuanced and extremely comprehensive response. Viewers, as I said, we're here in Tianjin. We're at the media center. Prime Minister Modi is going to be holding talks in the next 24 hours around this particular time tomorrow with President Xi Jinping. Prime Minister will be staying very close to this particular venue in a hotel, and he will be coming all the way down here tomorrow. It'll be a completely sanitized route, and there will be a gathering of a number of leaders from obviously the SCO countries, but That will all, of course, be preceded by that all-important 40-minute-long bilateral. That is a long bilateral, viewers, and it tells you that the agenda is going to be comprehensive. It is not just going to be focusing on one issue. It will be a comprehensive engagement, an overview of the entire gamut of Indo-Chinese relations, which have gone through a ebb and a flow. We have seen over Galwan and beyond that there have been, of course, stress points in this relationship. These stress points need to be addressed, particularly with regards to what has been a military build-up in eastern Ladakh and along the LAC, which has resulted in, of course, souring of equations, and there has to be movement there with regards to perhaps at some level or the other a redeployment, a de-deployment, as some people have called it, a de-escalation, followed of course by de-deployment. As of now, buffer zones have been created along which the various sides are expected to observe and maintain a distance. But fundamentally, we need a longer-term solution. So perhaps there will be focus on some of that. There's already been boundary-level talks to try and bring resolution. There are also a whole gamut of trade issues. There has to be a normalization of trade, people-to-people contacts. We're expecting some more concessions from China with regards to the supply of rare earth metals, sending personnel involved in critical areas back to India. The Chinese had withdrawn them. Perhaps after all of that, there could be some reciprocity from the Indian side, like looking at a review of some of the sanctions, in one sense, imposed on Chinese entities that were, of course, working here in India. And, of course, most importantly, the extra scrutiny that was being placed by the Indian government on Chinese investment. So there is a lot of all of that. There are entrepreneurs who have been here stationed in Tianjin, a historic city, who are expecting, of course, some sort of a deepening of the trade relationship. These are Indian entrepreneurs who have been based out of China